What's up, LL Nation? It's going to be a great show. I'm excited about today's show, Lucky Lefty Podcast. I'm your guy, Shaun Davis at SD2 Mics, and of course, the original Lucky Lefty himself, Malik Zaire. I should say the original college Lucky Lefty, right? Because the original Lucky Lefty is, Luciano.
That's what they say.
That's what they say.
Allegedly.
The original Lucky Lefty himself, Malik Zaire, Overtime Malik Zaire 8. Instagram and Twitter. We're brought to you by Onora Whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com, that premium American whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com. And if you drink, make sure that you drink responsibly. So, big show today. We're going to have Bruce Feldman of The Athletic and also Fox Sports college football analyst. Has two great books, Flip the Script, The Evolution of the Modern Quarterback, and also a great article we're going to get into it with him about some more buzz from ACC. Today is all about disrespect, bro. Disrespect. And the question we want to ask LL Nation Notre Dame fans is, do you feel like Notre Dame is disrespected? Do you feel like Notre Dame is being disrespected this offseason? Is this current team being disrespected? Being almost a 2-touchdown underdog going into the game against Ohio State? When you look at Athlon, Phil Steele, and Lindy's, they rank 7th, and 8th, respectively, in those three publications. ESPN has them, I believe, at number 6. Is this team and the brand of Notre Dame, with everything that's going on and everyone giving their opinions about Notre Dame needing to get in the conference, is Notre Dame being disrespected? And who do you think is the most disrespected athlete in college football? Who is the most disrespected player in college football? We'll get into that, right? But the breaking news of the day and the hot topic has been none other than Georgia head coach Kirby Smart, who kind of threw everything into a buzz yesterday with his comments on NIL at SEC Media Day. And Kirby, it's funny when you hear what he says, but we'll just give it to you. Kirby Smart, SEC Media Day.
The NIL program we have in place, we have a Classic City Collective run by Matt Hibbs, who does a tremendous job. It's built on being sustainable, because I don't think what's going on in college football right now at some places is sustainable, meaning can you do that year in and year out and repeat that? Can you honor the commitment that some people are trying to make to kids to get them to go to their school? It's just, it's not good for college football, what's out there. What is good is NIL is good on the basis of what NIL is based on, okay? For Dan Jackson to be a walk-on from Gainesville, Georgia, and come in and get an opportunity to earn money for his education, that is good. For a young man that has a father that's on dialysis down in South Georgia and he can't support his father unless he goes back home and works or he gets NIL, that is good. We have 95 players right now with NIL deals that are on our roster. That's incredible, the depth of that. There's so much good there. It's the guardrails, it's the parameters that we need to protect our game. And not only protect our game, guys, it's protect young men, okay? Because for a young man, we may have had the highest paid defensive lineman last year in NIL in Jordan Davis. We have the highest paid tight end in Brock Bowers in terms of NIL. Keely Ringo, I would argue, is probably one of the highest paid corners there is in NIL. So NIL can be a good thing, and they can learn to manage money at a young age. But to use it as inducement to get a young man to go to your school is not good for anybody or the game. I don't have the answer for how to guardrail that. But NIL has been good to Georgia, and it's been good to our players, and it'll continue to be.
Kirby Smart went on to say that he just doesn't, and this goes back to the conversation we've had the previous 2 shows, bro. With everything going on with expansion and NIL, it's really the haves and the have-nots of college football. And what's going on really doesn't impact the halves. Like Kirby's sitting there talking about it, but like Kirby said, we're good. Our collective is good. What we're doing. Nick Saban said we gave out the most NIL money. We're going to be fine. I think what they're pointing to is schools that are primarily and have primarily used NIL specifically for high school players in recruitment to get them to commit to their schools. That is something, and that is a model that those institutions will not be able to sustain. It's not going to be sustainable because if that kid does not come in and keep up with the parameters of what's being set forth, then what? Then what? Do you snatch his deal? Is he left hanging? But you told him to come to that school, but now you're snatching his deal because of injury or because of something else that happened. It's a model that's interesting. As he said, guardrails probably do need to be put on. You've been out front and transparent with your view because you don't have a problem with high school kids, getting as much value as they can get with their name, image, and likeness. But it's just very interesting to see Kirby Smart and Nick Saban being very vocal about the state of college football and where things are headed.
Yeah, when you at the top, like we talked about previously, it's easy to look down and comment and say a bunch of philosophical reasonings on why, you're on top and the things you're doing make sense. I think it's just hard for them to have a total perspective of the entire NIL scope because a lot of the things that they have work for them. It's like everything they do is turning into gold when you're talking about Alabama and Georgia's recruitment. NIL deals. He said, 95 players or so have NIL deals on his team. That's a top 1% of all college football. It ain't 95 players on most teams combined that got NIL deals, let alone on a single team. So I do think that when you're seeing what NIL looks like at the premium at these schools like Alabama and Georgia, and I'm sure Ohio State's in there too, you start to see the effect of the benefits. Now, you don't really hear too much about the negatives because a lot of what you're seeing, the success of the NIL is being highlighted. Bryce Young had $1 million before he took a snap and ended up turning out to be a good deal. End up winning a Heisman and playing in a championship game and a bunch of other things that a company that spent that money probably got their money worth. As you can assume, anytime you're dealing with money, there's a good and bad to it, and there's always a business aspect to it. So it's only business if you're not holding up your end of the deal. I think with these being what we call semi-pros or now semi-professionals, these kids have to obviously with a younger age just get more acclimated to the business side of any contract. So everybody knows money isn't free. And if you're not holding up your end of the deal, things don't always go the way they go. Now in football, it's a result-based business, which I think shouldn't be an issue for most players with NIL deals because it's no different than getting a professional NFL contract that if you're not playing well, they're not going to pay you. So I think this is probably a real life translatory type of a deal for football players to where they know the expectations of getting a certain amount of money because at these schools they're trying to get to the NFL to make that same or even greater money. So I don't think it would change the perspective or anything, but I do think that these companies have to do better research before they give a bunch of money to kids that they're hoping turns out. So that's with anything. If you're going, the value of these kids is going to be the value of which somebody's going to spend money on. If somebody want to spend $8 million for a quarterback before he plays, that's what they want to do. That must be the value of the kid. So you can't blame the kid for that. If the kid's not holding up to $8 million, because that's a lot to hold up to at 19, 20 years old, 18 years old. Can he do it? Well, we gonna find out. But him being a 5-star number one type of guy coming in, he should be able to handle it. So we'll see what happens.
And then what happens when whomever you make the deal with, they don't follow through. We've already read stories about Jordan Addison being upset about promises that were made in order to get him to USC that have not been followed through on. And, he's upset and saying, yo, where's my money? And, it's interesting conversation that I saw Unc Shannon Sharp talk about it. It's like one of the most important things that these young kids need to know as well is they need to get a tax account. Like, you need to get a tax accountant. You need to get someone that's going to make sure that you're in line with paying taxes on this money. This is not free money that you just put in the bank and you just go ahead and spend it like you want to spend it. No, like, this is grown man business. You are an adult. Once you take that money, you are no longer, quote unquote, an amateur, per se. It's pay for play. Like, you're expected to produce, and the people are expecting to receive whatever they want in that contract to get back in return on investment at more than just 1 for 1. Like, I put money down, I want at least 2 for 1 on what I put down in return for me in value to my organization and my business. I don't know how everyone else might view it, but if I'm investing $1 million in said young man, then I expect the attention based upon his performance, the attention he brings to my organization to bring me back minimum $2 million in revenue, or profit. So, and that's just business. And when you enter into that type of relationship, hey, more than the players, buyer beware. Because these organizations that are going after these young men, they have to be careful and making sure that they're making the right investment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want your money back in any investment that you spend. And these
they're
kids,
not just being generous.
They're not, charity is one thing, but you going into a deal like NIL, there is not much charity involved. You're really looking for a ROI, or return on investment. And I think, I don't see it affecting the kid too much, other than the fact that it's not the professional league to where if they was to take it, you spiral out of control. I mean, you in school, you still go to school. Obviously, it's motivating to lose it, but you still on a scholarship. You know what I mean? It's not like you asked out and you got to go get a job ASAP and you have nowhere to go. Like, you still a student athlete. So I do think it's a luxury that you get to have the benefit of losing or gaining a potential sponsorship and having a net as being a student athlete for the amount of years too. So it's a good learning experience for some guys. I'm sure they're going to go through. A guy like Jordan Addison, a guy who we believe is probably going to be drafted pretty high. One of Biletnikoff, his value has obviously been touted high enough to get him all this attention from different schools. In a position like that, I mean, you would assume you would treat it like the NFL and hold out. I mean, why not?
Wow.
You might as well go full force and hold out, because one, I think you have enough film and enough reviews to be able to get drafted with sitting a year. I don't think this year could do much for you in terms of raising your draft stock, just similar to a Jamar Chase, where the man went out undefeated. He just couldn't go to the league like his counterpart, Justin Jefferson. I think it's a similar situation. We see Jamar not play a whole year, still get drafted first round. It's proven that it can work. So for a guy like Jordan Addison, if he really is the NIL is important to him and the promises are important to him, holding out shouldn't be an issue. It'll change the dynamic of NILs because it'll be the first holdout, but it'll make these schools responsible and nip it in the bud that, okay, you can promise these kids just like you do in recruiting, but when it comes to this promises of money, you're going to have to stand by it when it comes to elite transfers.
Man, facts. And I hope that we don't see more stories like this on a smaller scale, because ultimately a name as big as Jordan Addison, you would think that USC and Jordan Addison will find a way to work that out. It's the names that we don't know, the smaller names that are not getting the headlines, that might end up getting played a little bit. And then how does this become a domino effect? And how does it spill over into recruiting? It's going to be very interesting. As Kirby Smart said, if there are no guardrails, we'll see how things go with NIL and recruiting in the years to come. So we asked the question, do you feel like Notre Dame is being disrespected? They're ranked 7th, and 8th. Lindy's, Athlon, Phil Steele. And then Lindy's showed some love because they did rank the Notre Dame offensive line as the #1 offensive line in the nation. And surprisingly, you would be surprised by this, bro. They ranked the Notre Dame secondary as the 4th best secondary in the nation.
See, look.
I knew that would get a response from you.
Yeah. That's like you trying to get us to overhype ourselves right now. We're not falling for that. Ain't no metric in the world telling you we number. How? We were just crying about not having nobody a few days ago. Yeah. We didn't even play no games, so it couldn't have changed that much. It couldn't.
Yeah. Thank you for everybody jumping in. NWJR. Yep, but we need to do something about it. He says he feels like Notre Dame is being disrespected. Brendan Stannard, day one. Thank you, Brendan. Once again, hope everything is good with you. 100,000%. Indy always disrespected, even when they're showing out.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from it's hard to not like Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for some people that like other schools know that even in a vacuum, it's hard to just beat what Notre Dame has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Notre Dame doesn't always come up with those victories that they're hyped up to win or expected to win or on TV every day, people feel like, okay, now it's my time to try to be the first to comment, be the first to say something, to talk about Notre Dame, this, that, and the third. Now, we don't help ourselves. I think it's a real interesting thing to see the Manti thing come out on Netflix. I don't know if they're trying to replace the new Rudy film or what, but
are you talking about the production that's coming out this weekend? I do. When I saw the trailer, I was like, why?
Like Manti had to have secured the biggest Netflix bag ever. Because I can't believe the fact that they found the dude, girl, trans person, and they put the interview. I didn't even know what the person looked like. You know what I'm saying? And they got the person doing the interview and all. And so, Manti has to be in a great place in his life to really, in my opinion, go so deep into this where I thought it's a lot. So I think that when you got stuff like that, we were the first to have the Hard Knocks version of Seasons with.
Yeah.
Before they jumped to different schools. So, we're the first to really be on the pioneer level. It's almost the same as like why they hate on Soulja Boy so much. But Soulja Boy really deserves a lot of credit for being the first internet rapper. I think, we deserve a lot of credit for being the first on a lot of things and trying new things. We were first on Peacock. That's not big right now, but it's going to be big down the road, And so I think teams that can't be a pioneer usually copy us or end up not liking us.
Shout out to Wayne Miller for jumping in. Sorry, but I don't feel they are. ND has been bad in every big game in the last 20 plus years. MF will change it though. I mean, that's a fair, if you're judging that. And the media probably feels that way until proven different in a big game. They're going to continue with the same narrative.
Yeah. I mean, Notre Dame is like a prize fighter. So no matter where they go, it's going to be talked about at a high level where people are going to have strong opinions, which is good because you want to be in a position where they hate you or love you. Because being irrelevant, like going all the way out there to Oregon where nobody write no news articles on y'all. That's fine.
Right.
You can go out there, but nobody cares. At least when Notre Dame is bad, people still care. And they may care enough to talk stuff. Like if we were 7-5, we would still be talked about as if we were undefeated. A lot of schools can't say that. A lot of players can't be a part of something like that and take those types of criticism. So to be a Notre Dame football player is bigger than just the average college football player.
Lucky Lefty Podcast. We're brought to you by Onora Whiskey at OnoraWhiskey.com and Premium American Whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com. Getting ready for Bruce Feldman to join us shortly. The most disrespected player, and I say this because it wasn't until I saw this piece of clip on yesterday that I said, you know what? I would agree with that. Just strictly from the standpoint of accomplishment, right? As much as we talk about promise and, kids and recruiting and how good they can be, ultimately, it comes down to what you do for me. And when you have a guy that just won the national championship at quarterback and he can't crack the top 10 list of returning quarterbacks, that kind of falls into it. This is the clip with Ben Watson. Of course, he's an alum of Georgia, but he's with the rest of the SEC studio crew. And they were talking about why this young man is the most disrespected player in college football.
I was like, this is weird. How's this going to go? But my question is, when is or will Stetson Bennett ever get the respect he deserves as an SEC quarterback?
It won't be from everybody on the stage.
I know it won't be. That's why I'm asking the question
talking
right
about
here on
you,
the
or
stage.
are you talking about Jordan?
He's fourth in touchdowns last season. He's second in passer rating, first in yards per attempt. And oh, by the way, he won a national championship. He scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to lead his team to the first national championship in 40 years for the University of Georgia. But he's still that guy that is not on anybody's list. He's not on anybody's top 5. He's not on anybody's top 6 or top 10. A lot of people haven't been last in the SEC. So is there anything that he can do? And I think that my answer is no, because he didn't start off with the right type of hype. But I don't think that's a bad thing for Stetson Bennett, and I don't think that's a bad thing for the Georgia Bulldogs. Many times, the best players have the chip on their shoulder. I think for Stetson Bennett, he comes in this year, he's got the same offensive coordinator. He's got a tight end room that is full of talent.
The best in the country.
Best in the country. I don't know how they're going to use all these guys. He's got a defense that may not be the elite defense from last year, but he's got a secondary I think it's going to be better than last year's secondary with guys like Keely Ringo coming back, Christopher Smith, Tyke Smith. I think Georgia is set up, and I think Stetson Bennett is set up for a lot of success. Will he ever get that elite quarterback status in the SEC from people who know what they're talking about? I don't know, but I don't think that's a bad thing for him.
Look, I'll say this. This is the perfect setup for Stetson Bennett to prove himself. He lost a lot of running back. He lost a lot on the offensive line. His number one receiver coming back decided to transfer to Alabama. The other receiver that he had that could have come back decided to go to the NFL. You have great tight ends. You have Todd Munson, who is an NFL guy and a very well-respected offensive coordinator in college football. I mean, you don't have the defense to lean on like you did last year. Go ball out. Go back it up again. It's like, look, to an extent, I understand, but then to another extent, if you're an NFL evaluator, he probably would not be one of the top 10 quarterbacks in college football if you're an NFL scout. Like, I don't understand.
This is the definition of reaching.
With
like,
5 fouls. With 5
reaching.
fouls.
Like, you trying to get fouled out in the first quarter. What are you talking about? It must not be enough to report on for you to be reaching so hard. Look how weak the top 10 quarterback class is right now.
Yeah.
And you're not even cracking that.
Yeah.
There is no elite to Stetson Bennett's game. It's not. And that's not somebody hating. That's just the truth.
Right.
There is nothing elite about him as an individual player, which is what the NFL is looking at in a lot of aspect. He's no different than Jake Fromm, just a little taller. There was nothing special about Jake Fromm then. Jake Fromm beat up my team at Florida throwing 10 passes. 10 passes.
Yeah.
So when you look at what's an elite quarterback, 10 passes in one game ain't putting you on no list ever. Ever. Don't care if you won a championship or not. And the confidence that you play with when the house is freaking stacked makes you play beyond your means. If Stetson Bennett was at Miami, if Stetson Bennett was at West Carolina, we would think that was an insurance agent, we were saying.
Yeah.
He's at a great position, luckily, because he walked on. Clearly, the recruitment at quarterback at Georgia isn't strong enough that you allow a walk-on quarterback who was roaming around on campus become your modern-day Rudy. Now, we know this is the system they want to live and thrive with because it holds a position of glory for somebody that's unathletic. It's no different than how we put our primetime middle linebacker in there that may not be the best on the roster, but he somehow holds the defense together. Right? Stetson Bennett is not going to. You can't look at this kid and be like, man, he has a good chance of beating Matt Ryan on Sunday.
Right.
Period. Now, if you can't put that two in the same sentence, then there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
Of course not, Ben Watson. If he's not going out there beating Ryan Tannehill on Sunday, you can't even imagine it. Let's not play these games. He's good for where he's at and what he's asked to do. He doesn't have a Hall of Fame team. Like, we're not even talking about great team. We're talking about Hall of Fame team.
Right.
So anybody without a Hall of Fame team, it's going to be a tougher challenge. So, no, I don't expect him to be anything close to what he was last year. He's going to play at the 7-5 level. He's the max that he's going to, ability. And they're going to win a lot of football games. And at the end of the year, he's still going to have a forgettable ass season. He's going to get his players drafted, though. He's going to get his tight end Bowser. He's going to get him right. He should. But he lost a lot of receivers, got a lot of guys that are unproven. So it'll be an interesting year for Georgia.
And I see some people look, there's a swarm of people in the chat that believe Michael Mayer is one of the most disrespected players in college football.
He's not.
And look, we've had this discussion. And look, you're Notre Dame fans, you love Michael Mayer. Look, most NFL scouts would tell you, honestly, that Brock Bauer is a better NFL prospect.
Yes.
Just because of the way the game is played.
Because the way the game
and it's not disrespectful for Michael Mayer, who's going to be the first tight end this year. And Brock Bauer is going to be the first tight end.
Yeah. Michael Mayer is right now the number 2 best tight end right now.
And Malik, you pointed to it, like when you saw him being triple teamed by Alabama and they still couldn't stop him.
And they still couldn't stop. What? Listen, it's okay if Michael Mayer isn't shown in those same opportunities. That doesn't diminish the ability of Michael Mayer.
No.
And what's disrespected about Michael Mayer? We all know he's a top 3 tight end in the country right now. He's a top drafted tight end in the country right now. He's on the Maxwell Award list right now.
Yeah.
He's Notre Dame's best player right now. He's getting double teamed every week. We know this from watching the film right now. So what's disrespected? Clearly, everybody respects Michael Mayer at a high level.
I promise you, Ohio State is going to respect Michael Mayer.
Yes.
Ohio
State not silly now.
No, don't get it twisted. No. There will be a scheme by Jim Knowles to eliminate Michael Mayer. from Tyler Buckner because he knows that's where Tyler Buckner, his first start, is going to want to go comfortably.
Alabama knew they was wanting to throw to Bowser, and they still threw it to him.
Yes.
And because he's a great player, he makes plays. Michael Mayer is going to make a lot of plays this season. The Michael Mayer thing that I think everybody is wondering is he going to be the dominant factor in a big game? Why I choose the Georgia tight end over Michael Mayer right now is that the Georgia tight end was the reason they was even scoring in the big game. Like, if they didn't have a tight end for Georgia, Georgia wouldn't even be in the conversation in any championship, nothing. That was in losing and in winning. Didn't he score the only 2 touchdowns in the SEC championship, the game that they lost?
Yeah.
So even in losing, he's the most important player, still being productive. Michael Mayer has not been that for us in those games. Or at least I can't remember
He had
a
a good
time.
first half against Oklahoma State. Really
but
good first half.
not on the level where he's
Big
breaking
drop in the
big
fourth
tackles.
quarter, though. Huge drop in the fourth quarter. Huge.
Okay.
I mean, first half, great.
Great.
We needed him in the fourth quarter. Huge drop. Huge. So, and David Solomon is right. And one of our day ones, look, schools like Texas and Texas A&M are going to be able to probably sustain that NIL. But if they don't win, they're going to end up being disrespected as they have been disrespected for not winning games over the past 5 years. That's what it comes down to. And ultimately, whether Stetson Bennett, whether it's Michael Mayer.
These are all, listen, we're tight end you. So
I'll be honest. Low key, I truly believe low key that Cam Hart could be viewed. If you listen to how people look at him when they talk about the Notre Dame secondary, and they immediately jump to Brandon Joseph after the back-to-back years Cam Hart has put up as the number 1 defensive back after coming over from wide receiver. Look.
Cam Hart is damn near no different than a Sauce Gardner. Same build, same effect. Guys don't really throw his way. He's a long kind of athlete. But you're absolutely right. I told you I was on a little hold on Brandon Joseph only because him playing at an elite competition week to week.
Yeah.
For them not even to mention Cam Hart and put Brandon Joseph with Sports Illustrated, this, that, and the third, I just think that's just a lot for what Cam Hart deserves going into the season.
Lucky Lefty Podcast. We'll come back to Michael Mayer and his comments on Bussin' with the Boys about Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman, and get more of your comments about the most disrespected players in college football going into this season. But we are pleased to be joined by someone I love reading literature and material that puts a perspective on life. And I was fortunate enough to be able to read an article by our next guest where he talked about his time. He spent years in rooms with coaches, staff, college football players. But the perspective of life in this article about his time being the head coach for his son's Pee Wee football team and what they went through that ultimately led them to success. And I can't wait for him to talk about it as he joins us right now. We can only be speaking about the Athletic, who covers college football, and also Fox Sports college football analyst Bruce Feldman joins us right now on the Lucky Lefty Podcast. Bruce, thank you for joining us this morning. How is everything going for you?
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the kind words. Good to be on with you.
Absolutely. So I didn't know. I didn't know what to expect, right? We were talking earlier this week, and, you sent me the link, and I started diving into the story. And the more I'm reading, I'm like, I can't put my phone down. This is absolutely amazing. Just talk about the journey and your decision ultimately, because you didn't want to be the head coach. You want, your son was playing Pee Wee football. You wanted to assist. You wanted to be a parent. You wanted to be part of the support. But what ultimately led you to make that decision to go ahead and be a head coach?
Well, it was like you said, I didn't want to do it. My son had played in another league, which is closer to where we live. So I knew a lot of the kids in that league. I didn't really know anybody in this other league. It was an NFL flag league, probably 25 minutes from where we live. Didn't know any of the kids. It was 5-on-5 as opposed to what he'd been playing 8-on-8. So it was kind of different, a little bit of different rules. And also, honestly, being the head coach, there's more responsibility to it. Like, I got to organize practice. I got, you make decisions. And I was just like, I don't want to do that, and it's just like, I don't want to put myself out there like that, honestly. And my son was already going to be put on a team of a different one. And then I started seeing emails from the league saying, we got to get 2 more coaches or else we're going to have to cut 20 kids from the program. And I felt like I had to say, so I agreed to do it. And then I go through this draft process and, again, we're talking about first and second graders to have a draft and there's a combine and they have them run a 30-yard dash and how far can these kids throw a football? And it's like, okay. And the draft's not a real draft, but I came out of there feeling really stupid. And then we had our first practice and it was a struggle. The kid who I thought was my first pick overall, because it looked like he'd run a good 30 time for his size. Maybe that was a typo or whatever. And so, like, I have a son who's was a second grader. He just turned 8. He's really into football. Like, he's obsessed with it, and he's a decent little athlete. But after the first practice, he's feeling awesome. Like, he's running circles around everybody, or because he knew what he was doing. And then after a while, I was like, this might be a bad sign that we're going to struggle. This is a rough team. And, I kept on thinking, God, I hope we don't lose so bad that my son's love for football goes away. Because I'd heard stories of that with other parents in different sports where they just had a really bad experience with one season. And that was that. It changed for them. And so, I kind of felt like we were going to be the bad news bears. And then, a couple things came together. We had a friend who is a coach and had just moved here with his family. And I knew his son was a year younger, but I knew from seeing his mom's Instagram that he was a good athlete. And so I said that, did he want to join us? So we picked him up, and we just, the one thing I learned, and I'm glad you mentioned this, was just from being around football coaches and talking. And look, I mean, you guys have been around sports all your lives, and Malik, I know you played it at the highest level. A lot of times you hear these things over and over again, and some of it seeps in. Even if it's not directed to you, it seeps in. And the biggest thing I took away was like, look, I'm just going to say to them, let's just be the most improved team. We're going to try to be the most improved team from beginning to end, because I didn't know if we'd win a game. And from that, it just kind of grew, and it was just like, because the expectations were so low, and I just tried to be really positive. And the other thing I did was, just from other experiences my son had with different football, I was like, we're going to rep this play. We're going to rep it and rep it and rep it. And we're just going to rep a lot of plays so kids have experience doing it, and that was important to me just because I felt like they would get comfortable with it. And I didn't give them too much to do, especially for some of the kids who were really new. I maybe gave them one role and they maybe focused on it the whole season, and they got a lot better. And it was the most amazing experience. And, Shaun, when you were talking about it, like, you didn't know what you're going to, I didn't know what I've never written anything so personal, and so I didn't know how it was going to be. But I think for a lot of people, whether you played it, or even if you're a parent who never played it and you were around coaching, whether it was soccer or girls basketball or softball or whatever it is, or baseball, I think it's a thing that we can all kind of connect with, of that parenting experience. And so I've been blown away by the response to it. I never expected it. I didn't expect, any of this stuff. And I feel very blessed that I had that time in the car with my son to just talk about stuff, and for him to see I believed in him and things like that is just a blast.
What really made me laugh was it didn't take long for you to have your almost blow it moment as a head coach, like the first game. When I read that part, I said, yeah, I'm sure he was sitting there thinking about all the times he sat on the sideline and questioned another head coach about their decision, and here he is in his first game, almost
Yeah.
giving the game away.
So bad. We are up, I think, 6 points. We have the ball. It's late in the game. And we are backed up. Like, we basically had 2 plays with basically the 2 kids who turned out to be our best, ball carriers. But the first one, kid tried to make somebody miss, got pulled deep, near our goal line. Next play, we ran a wide play and, got a safety. And so we had to give the ball back. And basically they had 1 or 2 plays left to try to win the game, because it went from 18-12 to 18-14. And so our team won, and our parents are all really excited. They're just, it's the first game, and I'm like thinking, I was like, man, I almost blew that game for them. It was so bad. It was such a stupid call, just so stupid. And I just kept on thinking about it, and they're all celebrating. I'm like, what an idiot I am. And I don't know if any of them, because also our families were on the other side of the field. So I don't know if they realized how close to the goal line we were when I ran that play. So I just felt so stupid. It kind of bugged me, the whole drive home. But then I got over it, but I think I got over it because I'm still talking about it. I still feel stupid.
That's right. How is it as a literary genius? You have brilliant work. You've been doing it for so many years. How has that been, and the synergy between that and sports been for you and your development and evolution through the years? Because you see a lot of great writers do a lot of things in film and TV, but you don't really get to hear the real synergy between what writing and sports does collectively.
I think at the end of the day, look, you guys are going to be storytellers with this podcast, right? You're sharing something very personal. You have your really unique perspectives, and it's the same thing. So it's like, okay, what am I trying to connect with people? What am I trying to tell? Because I think there's something unique in all these stories. Every player, every coach has something, but I think you're trying to find things that connect people, right? And so, for that story, for the Pee Wee football story, it really resonated in a different way. I mean, I'll tell you a story, like the most recent story I've done, and it just went up this morning, it's on Mel Tucker, the coach of Michigan State. But the Big Ten has had an initiative where they were going to take a large group of people, some coaches, some administrators, but mostly student athletes, for the first in this series down to Alabama, to go to Selma and Montgomery for a really immersive experience into the civil rights history. And for Mel Tucker, so I kind of saw that he had went. I had seen a little bit of social media that the Big Ten had done, but I know him a little. I reached out to him. I said, would you talk, do you have like 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Maybe we could talk about like what your experience is, what you do now. And he texted me back the next day. Yes, I have, and so we picked a time, and I didn't know he was going to we were going to talk for over 90 minutes. But as we talked, it was him really processing this life-changing experience, right? Of something incredibly important, and something that, while it may seem like ancient history to a lot of people, it's not that long ago. And as he said, there's a lot of stuff that's coming up that is not far, that's very current. And the story of how this works to me, I'm basically the conduit to kind of, to maybe teeing up Mel on certain things, how he's feeling walking through these things. Because I think it's really important to see where, how he uses this experience, not just on his own players, but we're talking about now one of the biggest names in college coaching, and what he does with this experience, and how he shared with me a little snippet in the story, as we're talking about, he was walking by an establishment, and a man about his age, maybe a little older, was like, there he is, there's my coach. And, he talked about just basically getting a lump in his throat because, who this man was, where he was when he said it, what he was experiencing, and what that, what he knows, the bigger picture. And so when you're talking about what we do as storytellers, or from a literary sense, it's about sports, but it's about a lot more than sports too. And I think that, I'm not saying every story is going to do that. A lot of stories, we're not set out to do that, right? But some stories, you can reach people in a different way, and maybe it's going to land with some people. Maybe some people are going to go, that's too heavy. I don't want to deal with this or whatever. They just want their sports. I get it too. So, but I think as you meet people and see what makes them tick, I think you have an opportunity and sometimes an obligation to take it way beyond just what goes on the field.
I think you did a great job in connecting or making a nexus to, the job that you were trying to do as a head coach, and first practice, having them run this one play that you had written down on an index card, and then eventually going on and making the process of, I'm going to use slow mesh as Dave Clawson uses it as Wake Forest. And then I'm going to make the connection with my colleague, Chris Peterson. And that connection is going to be the simplicity that he looked for when he left coaching, to have more of a balance in career and life. And simplicity is the word that stuck out to me throughout this entire piece, like how complex we allow life to get when we go chasing after things in our career and going chasing after things with family and relationships and other goals. But ultimately, it really does come back to, your relationship with your son and just really being there for him. And then your relationship with these young men. And I work with young people, and I can tell you, there's nothing more peaceful in my life than to be able to step away from what I might call the madness and to sit down and serve someone else. And I just think it was an amazing backdrop to this entire story. Just talk about, you going back to your relationships that you built up with Dave Clawson and Chris Peterson and how that applied to what you were going through.
Yeah, in the case of Dave Clawson, so he didn't know I was going to send him a text, go, hey, we ran slow mesh today, and it gave them problems. But it was just like, I always thought, if you can confuse somebody and give them a little hesitation, especially with little kids on the other team, I was like, let's see how they react. It was kind of an experiment, and it hit. It was like a 30-yard touchdown run, and I texted him and I said, hey, we ran slow mesh today. Gave him a lot of problems. He goes, well, you are the first. You were the only people the only other person who's running this now besides us. And he didn't tell me, hey, this is what we do or whatever. And then like over the next 2 weeks, like I said, my son's really into it, like too much so. Like he watches film and everything. And so I found a breakdown that JT O'Sullivan, the former NFL quarterback, did. It was like a 14-minute, it had all 22 of slow mesh. He didn't know why they read it. He didn't know. He was like, I think they're doing this. I'm not sure or whatever. But I watched it with my son, and, I was able to talk him through that. This is why they're doing this. This is why this is giving them a problem, is basically what I was showing it to him. And so we ran it again, and then I had like 3 plays built off. And I said to my son, I was like, listen, I think we're going to try to do this. Then we're going to give it to this guy. And then the third play, we're going to have, basically the player we thought the other team was going to be most worried about for us to give it to. I said, I want you to watch the cornerback opposite. I mentioned the kid another kid who was going to be our receiver out there. I said, I want you to watch the cornerback. If he comes to you, what do? He goes, you want me to throw it out there? I said, yeah, I want you to throw it out there. And then as I'm sitting there, I'm like, ooh, am I really going to have a post-snap RPO read with a 7-year-old, who, by the way, a 7-year-old, as I said in the story, we can't even get him to use his fork at the dinner table. And now all of a sudden I'm going to have him reading, a post-snap. But I was like, you know what? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's like, I'm not like, you're playing with the house's money, kind of, so to speak. It's like, I'm not getting fired. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And so the play worked exactly like he read. I said, why'd you throw it out there? He said, because the cornerback came. I said, great, got it. And it worked. I mean, it was like a 25-yard pass play. And so I called Clawson on the car ride home, and my son's in the back, and I said, yeah, it's working really well. And he was like, Ben, what's your favorite team? Are you a Wake Forest fan? And my son honestly isn't. He likes Malik's alma mater, quite honestly. So, because I work with Brady Quinn. And so I was like, yeah, he is. And he was like, well, no, I'm not. I'm like, you'll get there, Ben. Right. And then, but we didn't, like, Dave didn't say, hey, you should do, like, he wasn't giving me any like feedback on, because I mean, at the end of the day, they can read that play, dozens, if not hundreds of different ways. To put that on a little kid is not much. But what I did was, when you talk about Shaun, the simplicity of it, there was one of the kids who we'd run slow mesh with as a running back. Like my son would end up popping as a quarterback, but one of the kids, I'm talking, one of the kids was a first grader, one of the kids was a second grader. When I would show them the play card and say it's going to be slow mesh, they would get excited because that was their play, and it was just really cool for that to see how kids would get excited. We'd run like a staple of Leach's offense that we put in that I was like, okay, we need a man beater just in case anybody plays man. And we rep this, and we had one kid who basically was crossing route and what they would do. And those kids they loved that play because it was their play and they practiced it, and we'd watch it on film. Like, man, they did every detail, like just in real time. I can't see what they're doing, like on the routes on both of them. And I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my God, our center, like did exactly what, and we didn't even practice it that much. So it was just awesome to see how the kids took pride in what they were doing. Now if you had said to them, a lot of like basic stuff that the average football fan who's a grown-up would know, some of those kids may not have known those rules about it, but when it came to the play and their part of it, man, they bought in, and it was awesome to see.
Let's move over to, go ahead, Malik. You got another question.
Oh yeah, I was with it. I loved it.
Let's move over to Notre Dame, since you mentioned that is your son's favorite team.
Right.
Your colleague Brady Quinn that you work with, and I saw a spot you did recently, and you spoke on your thoughts about Notre Dame and where they sit right now with what's coming with playoff expansion and with the super conferences. It looks like on the horizon. Give us your thoughts on Notre Dame, where they sit, and ultimately, where do you think they'll end up?
I mean, they sit in a great position because they already have money. They're the one everybody wants, right? Because they have leverage. They're a huge TV brand. It's obviously a great academic school, and it's geographically, it's flexible because it's in the middle of the country. That works out great too. So, they have the connection to the ACC, but they're not tied to it from the football sense, where they get stuck into a very expensive exit if they try to leave from the grant of rights, because it doesn't tie them in on football. So if they're the Big Ten, that's the school you're like, yeah, we want them. Be like I said, Big Ten prides itself academically. Notre Dame is a great academic institution. You got the USC rivalry. You got history with Michigan and Michigan State that's really, predates all three of us, how far back it goes, right? So that's awesome. But they love the uniqueness of being the only real independent, and I think they can keep that as long as they can. But I think when the money becomes so overwhelming for the TV contracts, and then if it comes back to if a expanded SEC and expanded Big Ten decide, hey, we're going to have our own playoff, and there's not going to be a seat at the table for Notre Dame like there is now, then maybe it forces their hand. I mean, my hunch, and I've not been told this by anybody that it's going to happen, my hunch is eventually, and I don't know how long that is, that Notre Dame will join a conference. And my guess is it would be the Big Ten, because that's where the most money is. Because I don't see them maybe as much of a cultural fit with the SEC as I do with the Big Ten.
Right.
So
and you also talk about, Notre Dame's placement as an independent and how it's an attractive piece because everybody wants them. Is there a way where Notre Dame can become an Alabama type of dynasty, to where they become the dominant force as the independent outside of just the resources that make it great?
Just to stay as an independent, I don't know if that's how much better. Look, what I think is going to be really interesting, like I've known, just how hard it is to sustain at Notre Dame, right? It has unique challenges. You know this better than anybody, right? I do think that it's an interesting transition where you have a new coach in here who's a dynamic personality who I've known since he was a player at Ohio State, and was impressed. Like you meet him, you feel him. Like, there's something, like when he did something right at the end of his Ohio State career where I was working on ESPN magazine. It was a project we worked on with him, and whatever he was, 22 going on 32, right? He didn't feel like a normal college student, and he hasn't really felt like that even when he was a young defensive coordinator, because he was a young defensive coordinator. But I think what is going to be interesting is the relationships he can build and the connections he can make with people, I think Brian Kelly's a really good coach. No doubt about it. He's been a really good coach everywhere he's been. He's really smart, everything. But obviously there's this is a different personality. This is a different connection. I think it can, it can resonate with, maybe reach different kids who maybe say, what, I'm not, Notre Dame's a great school, but whatever. Let's see if they're recruiting much, it seeming a little better now, at least if you look at the recruiting rankings, than they had been under Brian Kelly. And they were recruiting well under Brian Kelly. But, if to get to the Alabama dynasty level, you have to basically recruit the talent Alabama is getting, right? And where it's like you are stacking a lot of big people and a lot of talented people. And then you got to add the great skill guys that they've added and really good quarterbacks. So, I wouldn't be surprised the way, let's see where it goes. Because obviously now you got to win football games to back up the relationships, to back up the way people, whether it's players, whether it's parents, whether it's high school coaches, how they feel about basically the new face of Notre Dame.
Right now, where Notre Dame sits, you talk to coaches, you talk to other writers, some kids coming into schools that are recruits, kids that are other schools. Do you get the sense that Notre Dame is respected right where they should be respected right now? Or do you get the sense that they're being disrespected a little bit based upon what Brian Kelly was able to do and where they're ultimately going to be in the next couple of years under Marcus Freeman?
I think there's a little bit of a wait and see. I wouldn't read a ton into the bowl comeback. They were winning and then they lose and Oklahoma State rallies. I think anytime with the first year head coach, your first time head coach, I think you really got to see how they're doing. Now, look, I love some of the hires he made. I would argue he has arguably the best running back coach in the country brought there in Dylan McCullough. Dylan McCullough, just from being around him when he was at USC, fantastic hire. He will, and there were good coaches who left. I'm not saying that, Lance Taylor was really good too, but I think Dylan McCullough, fantastic hire. Harry Hiestand, arguably the best offensive line coach in the country, right? You see what he did there. I see somebody nodding because firsthand what he did there, right?
That's right.
So,
undeniably the best.
Yeah. So, I mean, all right, running back coach, O-line coach, you're going to be physical. I know you are because of those key pieces. A lot of people wanted to hire Al Golden to be the defensive coordinator in college football this winter. So he's obviously been a head coach before. He has a lot of experience. To me, I'm very curious how this goes. I'm curious, honestly, how Brian Kelly does in the SEC. But I'm curious to see how Marcus is for the long haul, just because he's so young at doing it, right? And there's been a lot of coaches who come where you're like, man, this guy's going to be great when they get to be a head coach. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. It's hard to predict for sure. I'd be lying if I thought, Marcus's old boss at Cincinnati was going to be as great a hire as he'd been at Cincinnati. He had one season as the interim at Ohio State, and it was a struggle. And then he's been at Cincinnati, Luke Fickell, and he's been superb, right? And he's clearly got an eye for it. If you ask me, do I think Marcus will get Notre Dame into the playoff in 5 years? I will say yes. I think he will. I'm very impressed by him. I don't know how soon it will happen, but I could see him recruiting really well, and I could see the staff he's put together, and I think he's got a lot of nice pieces around there. And I'll be surprised if they are not in the playoff in 5 years, at least once. I'm not saying they're going to win a national title, but the question is, then it's one thing to get there, because obviously Brian Kelly had got there. It's another thing to actually really be able to compete and win those games.
How much of a relation to the billion-dollar quarterback industry that's grown to be what it is today, that Marcus Freeman can close the gap by securing a franchise-style generational quarterback? Because we've seen the top coaches in America, Dabo Swinney, Nick Saban, benefit from having the guy that you remember that's playing on Sunday today with these generational quarterbacks. Could Marcus Freeman secure a championship, getting that, dipping into that industry, really harping on getting a 5-star quarterback?
Yeah, I think so. And look, I mean, the fact that he got Lloyd Carr's grandson out of there to come to South Bend, I think that speaks volumes right there, right? You can win that. And look, I think Tommy Rees is very well respected. And I think that that could be a really good, combination right there, and look, kids are going to want to go somewhere where they can win and compete for championships. And obviously have a great education. I don't want to say it's a bonus, because you'd like to think you're going to get a great education wherever you go, but some educations are, like more prestigious than others, right? And some experiences are more prestigious than others, right? And so look, just from Brady and I worked together on the same crew for a few years, and there was a lot of stuff that I kind of like, we were at, certain places, and all of a sudden there was some, business person that Brady knew through Notre Dame, that it's a relationship that had developed. And I'm not saying you won't have that if you go to another top school, but there's a lot of resources and a lot of access that I think you can connect people to. Like, again, I feel weird trying to sell a Notre Dame.
No, I'm just saying I'm just trying to figure out, is there a formula? Because now the 5-star quarterback, nobody really knows the mind of what it takes. Because if you think Notre Dame as a quarterback, that's a no-brainer for a 5-star guy to go to, from the resources to the level of competition. Notre Dame quarterback is one of the most prestige, next to the Pope in terms of status. What is the formula that Notre Dame's not obviously getting to, where we're not pumping out Mac Jones, Tua, Jalen Hurts?
Okay, we'll start. Best selling point you can have is you can come to a place where you will have the best offensive linemen in front of you to protect you and block for you. To me, that's a great selling point. Now, the next thing you need to do, look, Notre Dame's had great tight ends. Alabama has a much better, more impressive run of receivers. You throw a bubble, that may go for 75. That's the kind of thing where they there's been obviously Will Fuller, and there's been some dudes, but it's not like it's been in Tuscaloosa. This run, you can start with Julio and go to Amari Cooper and just Calvin Ridley, and there are guys who we're going to leave out who are all Americans in this. Never mind, Devontae Smith and what we just had. And the opportunity to play with that, to me, the offensive line is a huge selling point. I think the other selling point has got to be, there will be just real difference makers outside, because that's an area where I feel like there's been some good players and there's been some big receivers, right? But there have not been the caliber that Ohio State has, and or the caliber that Alabama has in the last decade. To me, that is the biggest difference. If you can get a couple of those receivers, it's got to be more than like one. You have to get some dudes out there.
5.
Just guys who can take a short pass, go 75. That's it. So, and I think that's, if you ask me what is missing to win, to push them over the top, I think it is the receiver room to be more dynamic, and you got to keep upgrading on defense. Like, there's been really good front seven players, and obviously there's been good players at all three levels. Just need more of them.
Just need more.
Yo, I'm sorry. That's my bad. I'm so interested, as we get ready to let you go, Bruce. What's the off season been like? What's the recruiting been like for you, for your next squad, and trying to defend your title? And has NIL come into the conversation, like ice cream or some other thing, video game?
I am embarrassed to tell you guys like what the off season conversations have actually been like. So it's like, we had our first game. Our season started last Sunday. We had our first game, and it went well. But it's like, here's the challenge, and this is like, so you kind of like, I took all the lessons I had from last season. We have 4 of the kids back from our team. We have 5 other kids who are new. 4 of them are new to football. And so you're just, I kind of have a feel for now what I need to do. But then at the end, the other part of it is you sit there and watch, my kid has a pick six and he's like, he reads it well and he goes, then all of a sudden I'm looking at the film, I'm like, man, do I say something that he didn't separate enough from the receiver chasing him or whatever? It's like, just leave it be, just like, you get tempted to do some stuff and everything. We'll see how the season goes. The challenge, honestly, Shaun, in the summer is families are on vacation. Kids have other sports. They're kids, right? So we were down two of our better players last in our opener. We may be down another kid because he has a camping trip this weekend. My son is going to go he has a soccer game in the morning with his soccer team, and then he'll go right to football. So I don't know how tired he's going to be. The fact that I even think about that is kind of embarrassing, but just they're kids. I mean, whether we go 1-7 or not, like I try not to talk about winning the games. I'm just trying to let's go out there. We're going to have a good time. We're going to keep getting better. And the kids are getting better. That was a cool thing. So, it's just like, I know what the expectations now are with some of these kids. And, at the same time, they're kids, but it's human nature. So
does it change at a certain grade, a grade or a point of age where you're like, okay, we have to focus on winning? Or is it only professional?
You should talk to probably somebody smarter than me. I'll tell you that, yeah, it's just like, I go back to, you mentioned, Shaun, when I talked to Chris Peterson, because we work together and I'm in the green room with him every Saturday and we're watching football. And he had called me about something. This is in the story on The Athletic, but he had called me about something we were talking about just to catch up. And I said, hey, we had our three best players. They all kind of reacted to our only loss each in a different way. And I was trying to talk about one of the kids who really took it hard. And how do you reach them? And he talked me through this thing, and I mentioned it in the story. It's a formula: C greater than P greater than R, CPR, right? And the R is the result, and the C is character, and the P is process. And so I really try not to mess too much with the R, and really character, yes, but really more process, because the character part is as much, I get them for, an hour on Monday, an hour on Friday, and then an hour before the game. And it's just like, the characters, their parents.
I look for your character.
Yeah, we're really talking about process, what they do and everything like that.
Yeah.
So in an answer, I'm like, I don't know when it transitions to when you're really supposed to tee it up and talk more about winning and everything like that. I just want to make sure that the kids all want to play next season. I just want to make sure that they want to play next season. And from there, we'll see where it goes. I know I can't coach in the fall because I got my own job to do. So this is it. This is it for me in the summer league, from the spring league, which is the main one, then the summer, which all of a sudden now feels like the main one. But then it's like, once it's, it's like, okay, let's just make sure they have a good time. And I also want them to I'm lucky in that my kid really loves something I love. He will sit there and he will watch hours of video of football games, in the off season. And, I love that, we can go to on Sunday, just watch NFL games all day long or whatever. And he's into it. And it's something we have. And, because honestly, there's a lot of other stuff that, I may not be able, just to have that, because I know some parents where their kids maybe don't love what they love. And it's just it's just a good connection point for us to have together.
Bruce Feldman, once again, from The Athletic and Fox Sports College Football, talking with us right here on the Lucky Lefty podcast. I'm Shaun Davis, and of course, the original Lucky Lefty himself, Malik Zaire. Bruce, before we let you go, Kirby Smart and Nick Saban have spoken very loudly at the ACC Media Day concerning NIL and concerning expansion. And they both, Nick Saban just flat out came out and said, look, it's the haves and the have-nots. And fortunately, I'm at Alabama and I'm not really bothered by all of this stuff, but something needs to happen. And Kirby Smart echoed it in his own way, saying, look, we need to put some guardrails on this NIL and the way it's being able to induce kids to come to certain institutions. Do you feel that way, or do you feel like things just need to play out and let's see where things stand in a couple of years?
I think probably some guardrails would be good. I think that, as it feels like it's the wild, wild west, I think there's some, what could be unfortunate is there's going to be a lot of people who will be using kids, and that's not new. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff that happened behind the scenes for years. Now, some of it is more over the table. I just think that, I think we are kind of figuring stuff out as it's happening and what's going to be. And the thing I go back to, look, Malik probably doesn't know this, but like a long time ago when he was going into his senior year, I worked on this book, The QB, where I was around the Elite 11 guys all that time. So I remember being in the room and I remember listening to Jordan Palmer go to bat for Malik and all this stuff. But we knew who, like, Malik, you're the same age as Kyle Allen, right? Same year. Kyle was the 5-star from somewhere in Arizona, and, I know Malik's class, it was Brandon Harris.
Hackenberg, Max Brown.
Yeah.
Jared Goff was even in there.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's all right. So, but in that group, like Max Brown was a 5-star, Hackenberg was a 5-star, and they know it, you remember it. But like, think about how much pressure there is going to be now where you're talking about Nico going to Tennessee and he's making, $8 million. We don't even know how much some of these other kids, maybe it's inflated what has been reported on what some kids are made, but that's all people know is this kid's making $8 million. How much more pressure is going to be on these kids? And they're still kids when we're talking about, still in high school. It's way different, right, compared to that. And I think that is going to be hard because that rate on the 5-stars, and he just mentioned a couple of them. You mentioned because Goff was like a 4-star.
Goff was like kind of underrated at the time.
Yeah, so that group of, I'm trying to remember, it was like, so if it was Hackenberg, Max Brown, and then there was the guy who went to Michigan,
Shane Morris.
Thank you. Right, and so. But the two guys were the 5-stars. And if you look back at like the last 10 years, and I went back and, kind of looked at it, there's of the 5-star quarterbacks, they kind of live up to what the hype is, maybe 30% of the time. And now you're talking about, that's before all this other stuff. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, kids shouldn't be getting taken care of because everybody else is making money. It's just now, man, that's the pressure and the expectations and all that. It's just a hard dynamic to sort through. But I do think
you can get lucky and get a Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence #1 in high school. But that year was just, they lived up to it to that point.
Yeah.
But outside of that lucky year, it's kind of hard to even predict with all the other factors included.
Yeah, it's just so much of a spotlight. You got other factors, as as a quarterback that are out of your control, and I just think that it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out. Nick Saban's going to be fine. Kirby Smart's going to be fine. Kirby Smart just got like $110 million contract,
right.
So, the thing that was cool, and I don't know if Malik crossed paths with the name I'm about to mention, but like there's a kid who was always around the Elite 11 guys, and now he's a backup quarterback at UCLA named Chase Griffin.
Oh, Chase
is phenomenal, right?
He's a great player though. Like, he's not bad.
Yeah, he was a great high school player in Texas, right? He's 5'11-ish, but super smart, and he's already graduated from UCLA anyway, so he's out here. Like, and on the eve of NIL, probably like 2 weeks before I was about to go in, he came over to our house for dinner, and then I drove him back. And in the car ride back, he started talking about NIL as it relates to a lot of the female athletes at his school, the women gymnasts at UCLA, forgot a couple of maybe soccer. And he was talking about how much money they were going to be able to make now and what they could do with it. And I just thought it was so cool because that's something, I'm not saying that nobody thinks about. That's something that most of us who are in the big mainstream, aspect of college football or college basketball probably neglect talking about. And so for that, and that's a lot of athletes, right? That's a lot of look, I mean, I don't know if you overlapped with, and I'm blanking on the woman whose brother played football at Wisconsin. She hit the game-winning shot in the NCAA, Notre Dame championship.
Enrique, yeah, that's my
Yes,
Enrique's killing it.
Yeah, and look, hopefully, if that happened now, she'd be making a fortune coming off that, and so I think those are things that we got to make sure we keep in mind when the famous football coaches sound off about all the things, how bad this stuff is.
The irony that he sounds off and the next day he signs this contract.
Yeah. Is that irony? Is that really irony? I don't know.
No, you're right. You're right. So, Bruce, we thank you for joining us. Give us the one story you're going to be watching going into this college football season.
Man, we talked about one of them, and it's Marcus. I would say I'm fascinated to see what happens with Ohio State. I think they have such a loaded offense. I think CJ Stroud's fantastic. Their skill talent's great. I think Ryan Day's done a really good job of, because a lot of people feel like, all right, it's Alabama's year to win the title. Nick Saban's ticked off. He's got Heisman winner back. He's got Will Anderson, best player in the country. Watch out for the Buckeyes. I can't wait to see them this year.
It's going to be a great matchup against Notre Dame September 3rd.
Yeah, you got to come to that game, man. You got to go.
Yeah, I would love to.
Hey, if you're an NFL GM, Bryce or CJ, who are you taking?
CJ. I mean, Bryce is slight. CJ, I love Bryce, but CJ is like 6'3", 220, 225.
CJ's a big
and, we can compare Bryce to Russell Wilson in terms of a lot of things. Russell Wilson's like 5'10", 220, built like a running back.
Russell Wilson's huge, from a stature. He's not no little guy.
Yeah, he may be short, but he's not small. Whereas Bryce, I just worry about, if you're not asking me to pick between a Heisman winner and a pretty good college. You're asking me between a Heisman winner and a guy who might win a Heisman this year. So I would just go with the bigger guy.
All right, Bruce Feldman, once again from The Athletic and covering college football for Fox Sports. We thank you for joining the Lucky Lefty podcast. Good luck to you. Continued success, and go have another great season.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks. That was Bruce Feldman, once again joining us right here on the Lucky Lefty podcast. Hey, bro, the comments about Notre Dame, you have to feel excited the way he views it. This, Bruce has been around college football a long time.
That's right.
A long time. Has written great books, The Evolution of the Modern Day Quarterback, the book Flip the Script, and then just the story that we chronicled with him that's currently up on The Athletic. You can go and search that under his authorship. Just type in Bruce Feldman and the story will pop up. Fantastic to talk to him about that in college football and, his excitement to see how Marcus Freeman is going to fare as a head coach.
Yeah, I think he has shared the same sentiments we've had about what Marcus Freeman is doing now and what he can bring and what we hope he brings to the season coming up with Notre Dame. That changes his perspective. He gave credit to Coach Kelly, which is due. Coach Kelly provided a great consistency in a perspective to Notre Dame that we're in contention every year. But I think, like he said, Marcus Freeman has enough of what he hired to support where he wants to go, and his recruitment has been damn good as well. So I do think the one thing that he also shared that is something that we should speak more about, but we also know, is having screen poppers in that receiving room.
Have to. Now, we talked about it because we thought getting the quarterback
would attract
be the way to attract the receivers. But Bruce is saying, look, you go get the receivers, and now five-star quarterbacks will want to come to your program.
That's right. I mean, yeah, he the list started thinking about it. You got Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith,
bro.
You got these Henry Ruggs.
I literally forgot about Calvin Ridley.
Yeah,
said his name.
Amari Cooper, Julio. Anybody in the planet want to go play on a team like that?
Yeah.
And Georgia lost all their good receivers. So what that tell you about Stetson Bennett Benson?
You know what? It works for Alabama, but it doesn't work for LSU because their quarterback still suck. So other than Joe Burrow.
Well, yeah. That's because that's very true. Now they get a bunch of
they get the wide receivers, but the quarterbacks
super
mid.
Super
so
mid.
our guy who most of the fans in the chat think is disrespected on Notre Dame squad, Michael Mayer, had a chance to sit down on Bussing with the boys. And, just
How do you feel like Coach Freeman differs from Coach Kelly?
A lot. This is no shade toward Coach Kelly. I love Coach Kelly, but Coach Kelly would never be around in the summers or anything. And Freeman's been in pretty much everything. And I think Coach Kelly was probably out recruiting or doing whatever he needed to do, but it's pretty nice to have Freeman around all summer long, really. I mean,
he's just like in it with the boys.
He's in it with the boys. You know, he's in our lifts. He's in our runs. He's in it. He's talking with us as we're running and whatever and bringing it up. After every run, he gives us a speech. He gives us a talk after every lift, whatever.
He seems like a good speech guy.
I'm not saying that's bad or good between Freeman and Kelly, but those are just their two different styles, and I'd say probably everybody prefers Freeman's style,
especially as a player. I mean, like you said, like it's not like you're throwing shade. At the end of the day, Coach Kelly is a very successful head coach who's went to different colleges and built programs, and you do hear he's more of like a CEO-ish type or more of an office guy, front office guy. Which again, there's different ways to be successful. There's different ways to win.
Man, look,
I love it. Just don't do the end part.
Right. I'm gonna call Cap on that end part, bro. I have to. Brian Kelly knew darn well that not working in the summer and not recruiting at a higher level wasn't going to win championships at Notre Dame. Stop. And Malik, I think you froze. Bro. Your pictures froze, but I can still hear you.
Yeah, like
there you go.
Come on,
what are you talking about? Michael Mayer's like, he puts it out there, then he tries to clean it up. Like,
don't clean it up. Don't clean it up.
He was on the road recruiting. That dude wasn't on the road recruiting in the summer.
Because first of all, he answered way too fast. You know, he ain't even let the man finish the question before he said, "Oh, we like Marcus Freeman better," and then he tried to get back into trying to get Notre Dame mode on us.
Oh, dude.
And try to good Christian the situation.
Right.
The way you described it seems like Coach Kelly took a summer vacation like a teacher. He really had a summer and then came back when it came time to play.
Right.
That's not nothing to be, that didn't contribute to Coach Kelly's success. His absence during the summer. I promise you. So it's okay, Michael Mayer, to say he was absent because it's true.
You would know. You would know from personal experience.
The only time we've ever seen this man, Coach Kelly, during the summer is when he invited us the one time to come to his house to swim. Yeah, a little lake house. And I didn't even go. So
wait.
It just shows you Marcus
Freeman. Not to go, bro.
I didn't even go. But it gives you the dynamic also of the old man and the young soldier. Marcus Freeman he got enough youth to be like.
Just gloss over. I cannot just let you gloss over that you didn't go. I cannot. I can't. We can't gloss over that and just move on. No, bro. Look. No. What did you go do? What was more important?
Let me tell you, Coach Kelly, he only comes in when it's needed. You know how, when they say you get a job, you show up last second, leave early, do the least amount possible.
Yeah.
Coach Kelly is like that, but at this stage and age, you just call that tenure. You call that maturing, efficiency. That's what you call it at that age. So Coach Kelly used his time very wisely, as opposed to Marcus Freeman getting his feelers out there. He want to have his hands in the dirt, be with the guys in the trenches. That's a youthful guy thing. I just don't believe at where Coach Kelly was in his career, he had the stamina to be out there in them hot ass heat, encouraging us. That's not the suave Coach Kelly we know. But Michael Mayer, he's not coaching you no more either. You don't have to save this man and try to clean up all this stuff for him. What you saying is true. Just be like, we love what we got now. You already done switched back and forth too much. You done said everybody would prefer Marcus Freeman But then you say we love Coach Kelly too. Just keep it real. Just keep it real. We love it though.
Lucky Lefty podcast. I couldn't let that slide, bro. I just couldn't. I'm sorry. I couldn't let that slide. And oh man. It's been a great show. It's been a great show. We thank Bruce Feldman for joining us today, giving us great conversation. We thank you guys. We're almost to 2,500. Keep pushing, keep sharing, keep letting everybody know the Lucky Lefty podcast. We spin it different. Hit the like button, hit the share button. Most of all, hit that notification bell. Before we get out of here, there's one other person that feels disrespected and might be right behind Stetson Bennett on the most disrespected quarterbacks. And he says, you better watch out for him this year.
What are some of the things you're doing to stay focused besides the physical things that you've done?
For me, the main thing, man, was just to get back into work. For me, I didn't want to take any days off after the season, just get straight back into work. And I feel like that's the biggest thing, man. You go get whatever you put in is whatever you go get out, man. So for me, I want to be the hardest worker on the field. I want to be able to be there for my teammates and just put in the work, man. I feel like as long as you put in that work, you go get whatever you get out.
Yeah.
That Jesus piece will not save you. I have two words. Cade Klubnik. You know what time it is.
Petticoat. Petticoat Junction.
It's time to get petty.
Oh, we did a good job executing.
Are you upset with something?
And fire up the Petticoat Junction train.
I just don't like you.
You don't?
No.
What is today's pettiest story? Petty Junction.
That's right. Petty Junction, pettiest story of the day. Brought to you by Onora Whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com, that premium American whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com. Everyone in the front office of the Washington Nationals is on the petty train today. Everybody. Everybody that thought it was cool. Just because Juan Soto turned down that $440 million contract from you, that felt like it was a good look to send your best player and the cornerstone of your franchise out to the All-Star game and refusing to put him on a private jet and making him fly commercial. You should be absolutely embarrassed as a franchise. Everything was quiet. You decided to leak the fact that he turned down the contract in the offseason months ago. You didn't mention it months ago, but you decided to leak it weeks before the trade deadline so you can go ahead and get a good deal. It's ridiculous. Petty train. And then Kirby Smart. Here's your ticket. Petty train, my friend. One way. How dare you, knowing you're about to sign a lucrative contract, sit up here and spit on the opportunity of NIL for high schoolers and college players, talking about guardrails. You haven't put any guardrails on your ability to make money. You keep getting brand new contracts every 2 or 3 years. So you need to shut your mouth. Either you're all for the open market and everyone getting what they're worth or what they deserve or what they can get, or not. Don't speak against it and then profit from it the very next day. Got to put you on the petty train. Thank you for everyone that joined us today. Don't forget, share, hit the like button. We appreciate you. You make up LL Nation, and you make this show what it has become and is going to continue to be. For my man, Malik Zaire, I'm Shaun Davis. We spend it different. Make sure you spend it different today. We'll see you tomorrow.